Is God real? Let's face it, this is a question that every soul has found themselves contemplating at some point in their existence. The way I want to go about exploring this question is by first of all pointing out that it's vitally important that we first of all have a shared understanding of what the word God actually means. Because in order for us to really debate or analyze or determine does this thing exist or not, we first of all need to have clarity on, are we definitely talking about the same understanding, the same thing? Let me explain why this is really important. So the example that I'm going to use is using the word chips. If you were to ask someone in England, in the UK, for some chips, what you're going to receive in England is French fries. Whereas if you ask the same question using the same term in the US and you ask for chips, what you're going to receive is a bag of potato chips, which here we would call crisps. So you can see how it would be very easy for two people to have a conversation about chips and actually unintentionally enter into a misunderstanding when one person who may be British is talking about their understanding of chips, whereas another person who may be American is actually talking about a different item, a different type of chips. This point is really important when we are thinking and talking about the concept or the idea of God. Because in the world, so many people are using the term to mean something completely different than the way that other people are interpreting what that word means. So you end up debating with someone over what is actually inherently a miscommunication, a misunderstanding. So back to our question. To understand, is God real? I'm going to start by giving you my working definition of what the word God means. And when you understand what I am referring to when I say God, then we can come to a shared understanding of debating, does this thing exist or is this real? So my working definition of the word God is this. God to me is the infinite, unconditionally loving, divine consciousness that is animating and permeating through everything, through all of creation, everything that exists. It is the source point of all. Source spelled SOURCE, as in the source point of a river, not source as in mayonnaise or tomato ketchup. So this is how I explain the word God. That is my working definition. When I use the word God, that is what I am referring to. And going back to our chips analogy, you can understand why it's so important to understand what someone means when they use the word God, so that then we can have a conversation from that same shared place of understanding. The word God then, you can see, you can understand, used across the world, is used in many different ways to mean many different things. If I was to speak to someone, say for example, that is of the Hindu religion, they are using the word God or gods to refer to something completely different. They are referring to many different gods. There's a pantheon of many Hindu gods and goddesses, which does not correlate with my definition of God. I would explain or define the Hindu gods as instead being higher dimensional beings. They are beings and they are consciousness that exist in the higher dimensions, but they are not the infinite source of all things that I am referring to when I use the word God. So you can see how having this clear and shared understanding of this is my understanding of God, and this is the question that I am posing to you. God meaning the infinite, the unconditionally loving, divine consciousness that is the source of all things, that is animating everything that you experience. So with that understanding clear, the way that I'm going to answer this question, is God real, is by sharing an anecdote about an experience that I had. This was probably about 2 years ago, where a higher dimensional being shared their answer to this question with me. And I am going to relay that answer that they gave to you now in this video. So this is an experience, to give you some context, that I had when I fell asleep one afternoon. Now, here is a key thing to understand. When you are asleep and you are experiencing what we refer to as dreams, dreams are in fact interdimensional experiences that your soul and your consciousness is having. Now, the problem is, when your DNA is disassembled, when your DNA is fragmented in pieces, one of the things that you lose as a result of that fragmentation is your ability to retain the memories of your dreamtime experiences. So the point I'm trying to make is that everyone is having interdimensional experiences during the time that they are asleep. It's just that without the assembly of your DNA, you can't remember the information. You can't remember the experiences when you wake up. You're not able to pull that data package, that zip file, back into your conscious mind when you return to physical reality. This is the benefit of this story, because the DNA assembly process that I have personally been through has allowed me to be able to retain information that I am pulling through from my dream time, from my sleep. The experiences that I'm having in other dimensions of reality are things that I can access when I return back to my physical body. So the memory comes back with me. It is data, it is a zip file that I can open. Rather than it being corrupted, I can access that information upon waking. So this is the situation. Let me set the scene. I was in a situation where there was a group of people, a group of souls, a crowd, and I was there operating as, in some ways, a teacher, an intermediary between the crowd and a higher dimensional being, an entity, which did not have a human form, but it had, let's call it like a human shape, a cloaked kind of shape. The question that the group of souls were posing to this being through me was the question of this video: is God real? And this is the answer that the higher dimensional being shared with me, that I then reiterated to this crowd. The point that they explained was this: the question, is God real, is actually a flawed question when you truly understand what the word God means. Now, when we're talking about God, and we're talking about the understanding of that being the infinite consciousness, then another way of thinking about the word God is that it is a label that refers collectively to everything that is in existence. Let's think of this like dealing with a data set. So if you're in a spreadsheet or you're working with some kind of like data analytics, what you can do is create labels or named ranges within that data. And so let's imagine you took 100% of the data, everything that was included, everything that existed in this data set. That is really what the word God is referring to. It is the label that refers to everything that is in existence. Now, when you have that understanding and you come back to this question, is God real? Another way of phrasing that would be saying, does everything in existence exist? You're saying, is everything in existence real? And so there's really this flawed logic in the question, or in some ways you could think of it as being able to find the answer inherently implied within the question. Is everything in existence existing? The answer to that can only be yes. It's like a mathematical equation, because the word God refers to 100% of creation, 100% of existence. And so asking the question of, is everything that's real, is the flawed logic, which only gives you the one answer, which is yes. This is the point that this higher dimensional being was raising, that the question, is God real, is a flawed logic when you truly understand what the word God means. When you know that the word God is the infinite, and it is the reference to everything in creation, all of existence, then the debate of whether that exists or not, or whether it is real, can only leave one answer, which is yes, of course it exists, of course it is real, because that is what is inherently implied by the term, the true understanding, the true definition of that term. So in this situation, there I am receiving this answer from this higher dimensional being, and I relay this answer, this information to this group of souls who are seeking guidance and seeking help. And it's so profound when you truly understand the impact that this has. And going back to the real world implications of this, we have to start analyzing, in what ways is the word God being used interchangeably with things that are true and in alignment, or things which actually don't ring as true, don't feel correct for behaviors or opinions or rules that have been shared in the history, shared in our past, if there is any trace of narcissism in someone's stories or their definition of God, then that is the alarm bell that should ring to say, this is not a true story about the true meaning of God. God, who is unconditionally loving consciousness, cannot be violent, cannot be judgmental, cannot punish, and doesn't have hierarchy. It is the complete collapsing of hierarchy. So anyone that is using the term God to infer or imply any of those narcissistic traits is actually revealing to you that they are not truly discussing the real nature of God. And you need to have your bullshit detector firmly on to be able to understand and realize that there are many anecdotes and narratives that exist in the world where people are talking and referring to God, which are actually inherently narcissistic. In order to truly know the divine, you need to have this narcissism detector to know when someone is perhaps discussing the divine, but within a misunderstanding, some form of delusion, some form of distortion. And so I guess my advice to people who are still pondering this question of, is God real? Ironically, my advice to you is take the time to go away and study what narcissism truly is, and what the traits are, and what the experience is. Because it's only when you can arm yourself with a deeply embodied understanding of how narcissism projects things like violence or judgment or hierarchy or lies. It's only when you really truly have a deep understanding of what that looks like, what that feels like, the vibration of the experience of that deception, it's only then that you will be able to really see and decipher with true discernment what material that we have been offered is actually in true alignment with the true nature of the divine, or what things we have been told about God that are out of alignment with this working definition that I have given you, which is that the true nature of God is unconditionally loving. It is the infinite divine consciousness, the source of all things. Is God real? Contemplate this question. Meditate on this question. Journal on this question. Once you have grappled with this question within yourself, then the answers that you seek, the evidence that you seek, will be provided. Listening to one person's definition is in some ways also flawed, because I don't want you just to believe in the definition that I am proposing. I have this definition from my own personal experience with the divine. I am sharing it from a place of direct personal gnosis. And that is really what you should seek also. Someone else's definition is only ever going to be an external understanding. But use this content, use these ideas as inspiration for seeking out your own direct personal experience of understanding and learning what God is. And when you have that experience, then the question of is God real will be case closed. Once you are in direct personal connection and relationship with the divine yourself. So that is the dream I have for you. That is the opportunity that is available to you, to us all. That is the experience that I would encourage you to seek out for yourself so that you can have that direct personal experience of what it is that I am describing.